Welcome to Madlik. My name is Geoffrey Stern, and at Madlik we light a spark or shed some light on a Jewish text or tradition. We also host Madlik Disruptive Torah on Clubhouse every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. And this week, along with Rabbi Mintz, we explore the ins and outs of the 12 tribes. So gather your tribe together and join us as we discuss members of the tribe, who's in and who's out, and what it all means for us. So, welcome to Madlik. We tape this as a podcast and we'll post it before Shabbat. So if you enjoy what you hear, share it with friends, give us a few stars, and write a nice review. In any case, this week the Parsha is Parshat Vayechi. And as you mentioned last week, Rabbi, it is the end of the book of Genesis. So it's a momentous occasion, and it's really about Jacob, the last of the patriarchs, on his deathbed, so to speak, blessing at least his grandchildren, Manasseh and Ephraim. And then, although many people think that he is blessing the rest of his boys, we will be the judge because the blessings can be pretty harsh, to even put it mildly. But I have to say that, there are many aspects of the Parsha that are fascinating, but I am looking forward to seeing West Side Story, and that is about tribes, and that is about different clans, and so I decided let's talk about the tribes because they feature so highly here. And in fact, as we shall see, it's the first time in the Bible that not only are the tribes of Israel mentioned, but are the fact that there are 12 tribes mentioned. So in Genesis 49, it starts out pretty innocuously, and it says, "And Jacob called his sons and said, 'Come together, that I may tell you what will befall you in the days to come. Ba'achrit hayamim.'" And I don't know about you, Rabbi, but when I was studying in the seminary, in the yeshiva, everybody seemed to follow the traditional explanation of what happens ba'achrit hayamim, in the end of days, so to speak, this is the first also reference to eschatology, to the end of days. And this is the interpretation that Nachmanides, for one, gives. And he goes, and everybody agrees that this is what it is talking about. And of course, what is a little surprising is the fact that it doesn't mention anywhere these end of days, takes a little bit away from his argument, and he has to actually explain, if he's going to make a prediction about the end of days, why doesn't he say it? And if the traditional explanation is that he was hushed up by the angels because we can't know what will happen in the end of days. So let's start right there. What, Rabbi, do you think is meant here by Ba'achrit hayamim, in the days to come? Is Jacob about to make a big disclosure and is hushed up?
So the rabbis like to say it like that. Like this was almost the moment when we would know what was going to happen for all of us, and it didn't happen. But I don't think that's the simple reading of the Torah. I think the simple reading of the Torah tells us that what's really going on here. Do you hear an echo, or is it okay?
I'm going to silence myself.
Oh, it's okay, good. So I think what's really going on here is that Jacob is making predictions for each of his sons about what's going to happen. I think that's the key word. Sometimes we say the blessings that Jacob gave to his sons, but it's not true. They're not all blessings. Some of them are actually not blessings. Some of them are curses. And so therefore, I think Ba'acharit Hayamim is what Jacob is saying to them is, this is what's going to happen to you in the time to come. This is what you should expect from your tribe going forward. So Judah gets the blessing of kingship, and Joseph gets the blessing of a double portion. And Simeon and Levi get cursed because they, killed the people of Shechem. It's a prediction of what will happen be'acharit hayamim.
So, I think throughout Genesis, we've found many times where it'll give the name of a place and it'll say, this is what it's called, Ad Hayom Hazeh, until these times. And of course, biblical critics will use that as proof that it was written at a later date. And those who are loyal to the fact that it is a holy writ and it was given at Sinai will say simply that the Torah knew that it was going to be read in many ages to come and made a prediction. So I think we can kind of quickly get around that problem and let Jewish commentators, whether they believe that the Torah was written at a later date or not, speak with each other. And I'm almost tempted to start calling the Madlik podcast into the Shadal podcast, because once again, I am visiting my new friend, Shmuel David Litzato, and he actually references these critics. And he says that clearly there is no reference here to the days of the Messiah. And clearly it relates to the conquest of the land of Israel and its division. So the direction that he takes it in is, as we shall see, it's the first time that we will get a reference to the tribes of Israel, even to the 12 tribes of Israel. And rather than blessings, we shall see that Jacob is actually describing and evaluating the children. And we're going to focus on Shimon and Levi in particular, because Shimon and Levi are picked out, and he says something when he talks to them about and what the ramifications will be of his negative critique. So let's go right to the portion. It starts by saying, listen to Israel, your father. Reuben is my firstborn. And he talks about how he was the child who gave him his fruit and vigor and rank. But in a little bit of an Oedipal moment, we didn't discuss this on Madlik, but Reuven did try to lay with his on his father's bed, and so he's not happy with Reuven. But then he gets to Shimon and Levi, and he says, Shimon and Levi are a pair. Their weapons are tools of lawlessness. Let not my person be included in their council. Let not my being be counted in their assembly. For when angry they slay men, and when pleased they maim oxen. Cursed be their anger so fierce, and their wrath so relentless. I will divide them in Jacob, scatter them in Israel. So here, and we're going to get to the background, the context of why he is cursing them in a sense and thinking unhighly of them. But for now, I would like to focus on Achalek beYaakov va'afitzam beYisrael, that I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. Clearly, that is a reference. If any of you now or after Google map of the tribes of Israel, you will see two interesting facts. Number one, the tribe of Levi did not get a portion. They were given towns throughout the land of Israel. I think if you wanted to reference a modern day or a Buddhist monk who lives off of charity, who lives off of tithes, you would have a better picture of the way the Levites were living in the land of Israel. They were given land to live in, houses to have, cities, if you will, but not to have agriculture. And they were dependent on the tithes, the maaser, given by the rest of Israel. And then if you look in that map and you look at Shimon, you will see that Shimon is inside of the tribe of Judah. So the truth is that this, I will divide them and scatter them in Israel, actually does relate to the distribution of land to the tribes of Israel. That's the Shadal's reading. I find it very convincing. What about you, Rabbi?
I didn't know that reading. That's a good reading. And that's what it means to really to separate them. And it's interesting that in the predictions he says Shimon v'Levi achim. He puts Simeon and Levi together. They're the only two tribes that are put together. Everybody else gets their own blessing or their own prediction, but Shimon and Levi get a joint prediction. What do you make of that?
Well, I think the commentaries will say that they had the same mindset, that they were of the same philosophy. Um, I will make a point later that because we are talking about tribes here, it's not necessary that it gets wrapped up with a bow so simply that these are necessarily the 12 children of Jacob. You could make the argument that what we are experiencing here in the book of Genesis is how different peoples, different tribes, different clans came together and united in the land of Israel. And from that perspective, when it says about two of them that they were Achim, maybe that means they were literally Achim brothers, but some of the others, maybe not so much. But I'm going out on a limb there. I definitely think they were like-minded.
That's good. That's interesting to kind of give a positive twist to it. They were brothers. They were like-minded. Turns out they didn't necessarily do the right thing, but they were like-minded.
So as I said, in this little last words, last bequest, Jacob does for the first time say in verse 16, Dan shall govern his people as one of the tribes of Israel, Shiftei Yisrael. And even since it's the first time that we think of Shiftei, it does give us pause, because until now we were talking about a closely knit family. We weren't talking about tribes per se. And then towards the very end, it says, all these were the tribes of Israel, 12 in number. And the interesting thing about this 12 in number is that there are other places in the Torah where the number of members of the tribes are delineated, and they're not always the same in terms of membership. They are always the same in equaling 12. In this particular rendering, there is no Manasseh and Ephraim, who, if you look at that map that I hope you Google, you will see that there were two tribal spots for Manasseh and Ephraim, and there is no spot for Joseph. So in a sense, Joseph did get the firstborn who gets a double portion. But there were other times at the end of Deuteronomy, which we read a few months ago, that again, Moses blesses all of the tribes of Israel. And there, believe it or not, there is no mention of Shimon. So I think we can kind of conclude from that there is a dedication to this number 12, whether it's 12 months of the year, whether it's the signs of the zodiac, whether it's just something that is universally accepted as complete and unified. The idea is that there was a unified people, but the membership is not altogether clear. Do you think that's a safe supposition?
I think that is a safe supposition. Yes, I would agree with that.
Good. So now let's get to the meat of the story. I said that I really was driven here by the upcoming release, or it's already been released. I can't wait to see West Side Story. And of course, West Side Story is based on Romeo and Juliet. And I think if you keep that in mind, and now we're going to read why Shimon and Levi got the bad end of Jacob's wrath here, we're going to read a story that really can be read and smack of a Romeo and Juliet type of story. So it goes back into Genesis 34, and it says, Dina, the daughter of Leah, born to Jacob, went out to visit the daughters of the land. Shechem, son of Hamor the Hivite, chief of the country, Nasi Haaretz, saw her and took her and lay with her. And my English translation says, by force. Being
Right, good.
strongly drawn, so far we have a rape. Being strongly drawn to Dina, daughter of Jacob, and in love with the maiden, he spoke to the maiden tenderly. Gets a little complicated now, because now it sounds like a love story.
Right.
Shechem said to his father Hamor, get me this girl as a wife. Jacob heard that he had defiled his daughter Dina, but since his sons were in the field with his cattle, Jacob kept silent until they came home. So we clearly see that Jacob is ambivalent. Maybe he needs to talk with the other sons in terms of what a strategy should be, how he should relate. But anyway, his response is all not together clear either. Then Shechem's father Hamor came out to Jacob to speak to him. Meanwhile, Jacob's sons, having heard the news, came in from the field. This is very dramatically written. The men were distressed and very angry because he had committed an outrage in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, a thing not to be done. But Cain lo ya'aseh. And Hamor spoke with them, saying, my son Shechem longs for your daughter. Please give her to him in marriage. Intermarry with us, give your daughters to us, and take our daughters for yourselves. You will dwell among us, and the land will be open before you. Settle, move about, and acquire things. Then Shechem said to her father and brothers, do me this favor, and I will pay whatever you tell me. Ask of me a bride price ever so high, as well as gifts, and I will pay. And the story goes on, and the brothers come back, and they're very angry. And they come back, and it says at this point, it says, you have one condition that we will agree with you, and that is that every male be circumcised. Then we will give our daughters to you and take your daughters to ourselves. So depending how you look at it, you could say that they are using ritual and circumcision as leverage. Alternatively, you could be saying that they are agreeing to become a kindred. And since the Israelites have believed in circumcision, they were asking them to join their group, to join their tribe. Then Hamor and his son Shechem went to the public place of their town and spoke to their fellow townsmen. So here too, just as Jacob had kind of waited until his people, his children, came home to discuss it with them, now Hamor does the same thing. And he discusses it with his fellow townspeople. To make a long story short, he convinces all of the townspeople to get circumcised. On the third day, which according to tradition is the hardest day to recuperate from surgery, Shimon and Levi come and they slaughter all the people of Shechem. And then the rest of the boys come in and they rob all of the belongings. They plunder the town of their sister because that was defiled their sister. Jacob thinks he has the last word, and he says, what have you done? We are a minority. We are weak. My men are few in number, so that if they, the Shechemites, unite against me and attack me, I and my house will be destroyed. He says, you have brought calamity upon us. And Shimon and Levi said, no, should our sister be treated like a whore? We did the right thing. So this could be a story of rape, but I would argue as much as you have in here the ingredients of a rape, you also have the ingredients of a love story. You also have the ingredients of a turf war between two vying tribes and the potential for bringing those tribes together. How do you read this story, Rabbi, or anybody in the audience?
I think that your read is the right read. Well, let's go back to the beginning. You point out the fact that when you read the story, it's not entirely clear whether it's a rape story or a love story. And actually, Geoffrey, the whole story is different depending on whether it's a love story or a rape story. Because if it's a rape story, then the brothers are taking revenge against the people for raping their sister. If it's a love story, then it's a story about assimilation. And the fact that the brothers are opposed to assimilation, they don't want to assimilate with the people of the land, and therefore they feel they have to kill the people of the land. And you wonder about Jacob's reaction being so upset with them. Which reads better? Would Jacob be upset with them that they took revenge against people who raped his daughter? Maybe it makes more sense that Jacob is upset with them because it's really a love story. And what they don't like is they don't like the assimilation. And Jacob thinks that's not the way you deal with it. If we don't want assimilation, we don't have to have assimilation, but you can't go killing the people. So I think, Geoffrey, that's something to consider, the fact that the story reads differently if you have it as a love story or as a rape story.
I think the higher biblical critics say that clearly this is two stories not necessarily elegantly edited together.
Correct. So we don't usually, obviously the critics are important, but usually when we study this stuff, that's, in a sense, that's too easy. They put together two stories. But the problem is that the beginning of the story is two stories, but there aren't two endings, Geoffrey. You wonder why there aren't two endings if there are two beginnings. Maybe Jacob's reaction is different if it's a love story or if it's a rape story.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that helps guide me is now, after many years, we got his initial reaction. His initial reaction smacks of the ghetto Jew who's afraid, of the minority who's afraid. What he says on his deathbed is a little bit more strident. He says their weapons are tools of lawlessness. He accuses them of acting out of anger and slaying people. I, by way of looking down that way of trying to evaluate it, I would look at what happens when we get to Deuteronomy. So at Deuteronomy, when Moses is blessing all of the children of Israel, he praises the tribe of Levi. You will remember at the sin of the golden calf, it was the tribe of Levi who stood up, and they were the ones who took God's challenge and went ahead and killed all of the people, their fellow Jews, who had worshipped the golden calf. And in Deuteronomy, Moses says, almost to their credit, that they did not consider even whether that person was related to them or not. So it's clear that, to my mind, that there is an aspect of Levi, at least, which has to do with the purity of the ideology, the purity of the family, the purity of the tribe, and the purity of the nation. And I think that that is the aspect that I take away if you read this from the perspective of a kind of the beginning of the creation of the 12 tribes. That if we see this story, and it's, you can't but overlook not only the romance here, but the romance is so strong that clearly Hamor and Shechem, who are the majority, who are ruling the land, who are in a similar position as was when Abraham bought the kever, he was begging. Here, they who have all the chips, all the cards, are truly saying, we want to accept you. We want you to be able to walk amongst the land. And I think my take from this is that if you look at the two blessings, there's the critique of Jacob and the critique, or I wouldn't say critique, the admiration that Moses has relates to, and of course we can't forget the Zariz, Pinchas, who was also a Levi, who speared the Moabites with the Israelite. These are people who took God's ideology very strongly and took the law into their own hand and retained the racial purity, if you will, of the people of Israel. And
now, yes, sorry.
Go ahead.
I would just add one thing. Moses skips Shimon when he gives the blessings at the end of Deuteronomy.
He does, and I'd love to hear what your explanation is.
So I think what you just said is right. I don't think Moses forgets what Jacob said, cursing their anger and all of that. I think Levi actually, in a certain sense, turns, they become good because of the way they acted at the sin of the golden calf. In a sense, they did tshuva. And Moses, therefore, reflects on their more recent actions at the time of the golden calf. But Moses does not forget what Jacob says. And therefore, Shimon, which never actually repents, they're just totally left out, which I always found was fascinating.
Absolutely. I would maybe add maybe a little bit more commentary in terms of, I'm not sure that Levi ever changed totally, but they were able to channel, or at least Moses was able to channel, and history was able to channel that anger. There is a place maybe for that anger and for that Puritanism. I do think it's important to note that not only were the tribe of Levi not landowners, but they didn't get drafted into the army. So they were not allowed to militarize, so to speak. And they did have to, they were distributed through the land so that they had to beg. There's an interesting parallel story that happens much later on and is in the book of Chronicles. Or maybe it's in the book of Joshua, and that is a story of when the Israelites came into the land. They said that they were going to get rid of all of the existing infrastructure and tribes that were living there. For whatever reason, we can get into it on another day and discussion. But they felt very strongly about that. And there was one of those inherent tribes who made a decision. They said, rather than get killed, let's get dressed up and pretend that we are not one of the 7 tribes, but we are from outside the land, and we'll make a treaty with Joshua. And they do just that. And then, of course, just like the ruse of Shechem and Hamor is revealed, their ruse is revealed too. But the difference is that Joshua says, we made a deal, we're going to keep the deal. So I think if we have to I think my takeaway from this discussion, and from ending the book of Genesis is that one thing is clear, that the stories of the patriarchs are not sugar-coated. They lend themselves to interpretation in multiple ways. There are no heroes or complete demons. There are multiple sides to each of the different personalities that we have met, and that the history of our family, of our tribe, and our nation has sordid elements to it, to say the least. But nonetheless, at the end of the day, there was a moment of unity that was achieved. It was a moment because you all know about the lost tribes. They truly did get lost. We split up pretty quickly, and Judea was the tribe of Judah. The other tribes disappeared. So I think the warning is clear. But I think that the message is that we are not as homogenous as one would believe. One can walk down the streets of Israel, Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, see all these different colors, all these different types of people. That is who we are. Welcome to the family. But this is the setting stone for now what is the next book, which is the book of Exodus, where we get molded into one people from the outside, if you will.
I think that's really a nice idea, and that's really a nice way to look at this moment. I think, I just like the moment where Moses blesses the people at the end of Deuteronomy. This is the end of the book of Genesis, and it's very striking that this is the way both the book of Genesis and the book of Deuteronomy end, with these kinds of blessings or predictions for the future. There's always a look towards Acharit Hayamim, towards the future. The book ends, but it's not an end. It's a look towards Acharit Hayamim. So we kind of go back at the end to where you started with understanding what Acharit Hayamim really means. So I want to thank you, Geoffrey. I think this was a great discussion about Vayechi. To everybody, I say Chazak, Chazak, v'nitchazek is what we say always when we finish a book of the Torah. We should be strong, and we should be strong. We should strengthen one another, and we look forward to seeing you next week again, 8:00, where we'll talk about the book of the Parsha of Shmot as we begin the book of Shmot. Thank you, Geoffrey. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. See you next week. And anyone who wants to make a comment or come on up, feel free to do so.